What's happening, art family? This is another tutorial from beginnerdrawingcourse.com. It is the recently released character drawing course, and it is going to be a tutorial showing you how to get your characters from grayscale tonal separation to full color without any shading, just really simple stuff. I hope you enjoy, and if you like, you can check out beginnerdrawingcourse.com for more courses and tutorials to help you on your artistic ascent. Happy creating. Hello and welcome to the grayscale to color demo. So we're going to be using Maxwell for this one, and as you can see, I'm just going through the layers here, checking on what's what so that when I'm proceeding I can just have an idea of which layer holds which corresponding value. And you see I started off with the values. We already had the demonstration portion for this part of the character wherein everything was just about separating those different tones, making sure that those tones were distinct from one another. And that helps to really create a much more readable character. Basically, when you have line work and you don't have any tonal separation, even if it's just a two-tone separation between, black and white or light and shadow, you can really get creative with your tonal separation. But the main point here is that if you don't have any, it's going to lack contrast. It's going to be hard to tell what's what. Even if you have really amazing lines, that can get you very far, and you can distinguish certain objects and forms by weighting your lines, as we talked about earlier in the course. But that being said, knowing what level of relative brightness or darkness any given part of a character's outfit or attire or design is going to be is immensely helpful. And that's why I had him in grayscale first in this case. And you see it takes me much longer with the other characters when I don't have them in grayscale typically. Sometimes it comes together very quickly. Sometimes it takes a lot of guessing and checking with the value structure as well as the color, because you're balancing two different variables as instead of trying to just get by on one once you understand what they should be. So you're actually balancing more than two if you consider all the different pieces you're coloring and how they coexist on the entirety of the character. It has to be comprehensive, it has to be synergetic. So without that knowledge, it makes it really hard to color a character sometimes. But in this case, since we had tonal separation already, I know what the approximate tone of the skin is going to be. I know what the approximate tone of the dark undershirt is going to be, or the gray of the undershirt as well. And it really helps just to lay everything out tonally, and then we can just go over it one more time with the same fill layer with a normal brush, and just kind of add the color, because we already know what the relative brightness or darkness is. So in this case, you're just seeing me using the hard round brush. I'm going through and taking my time, just moving around different things. It can be kind of tedious, but this is the part where you can just sort of turn on music and make sure you're coloring in the lines, which all of us have essentially learned since we were kids, since we were children. And that really creates a very flow state of working. It makes it very nice to just go through and begin working slowly to just move around all these different forms, all these different delineations and details. So I know that a big portion of Maxwell's design uses yellows. He also has some reds and some browns, so it's all kind of along the warm spectrum. But then when we get down to the pants, we add more cools. We add the blues. Again, we tie it together with the brown. And then we have a couple neutral tones in there as far as some of the tertiary items or accessories are concerned. The axe head is even kind of golden. So it really kind of speaks to him as a smithy. Like, gold is a valuable material. Yellow is very bright, and it's the most eye-catching color. That's why you see a lot of indie movie posters use yellow. That's why you see oftentimes the sun is represented as yellow. It's a very drastic kind of hue, and when it reaches your eyes, then it really grabs your attention. So I know that I wanted a fair amount of yellow on his design. There's also a pretty decent amount of orangish yellow and whatnot on Pren, but she has a lot more variety in her color scheme simply because she's more eclectic than Maxwell. But he basically just has these sort of cool colored pants. I think I changed them a little more blue later down the line, but sometimes you just go in and you test. You make your brush larger by using the bracket keys on your keyboard, and that's pretty universal. I've recently been using more Clip Studio Paint, and it still works in there. And I also utilize my iPad and Procreate sometimes, and you can also get the bracket keys to change your brush size in that program as well. It's really very convenient whenever you're coloring something, especially when you're recoloring it. I know, looking back at this, since the tonal separations were so clear and the line art is so clean, I probably could have got away with the paint bucket, but I've learned in Photoshop you really can't trust the paint bucket very much, at least not in many instances. What you would have to do is to encircle all of the areas with the lasso tool that you want to paint. And then you would go in and make sure that the paint bucket only fills the stuff you want. But otherwise, it's kind of finicky. Not only because Photoshop is a raster or roster-based program, as opposed to Vector, which uses, to my understanding, more mathematical scalability in the code. That's why Vector can be blown up massive and not lose any resolution or quality, whereas Photoshop, the roster-based imagery can only get so big or can only be scaled down so small without losing some quality, and there are compression algorithms that are written in the program for that. However, you really just want to find a nice way to get this part done. It only takes me about 12 minutes, which is about as long as this demo is, to get all of this colored in once I understand the different tonal contrasts, once I understand the value scale of this character. All these different pieces and parts and components were already separated. So some of the work is very much done by this point, and it's really just about choosing the colors that are going to be reflective of the character. In this case, the pop of red is a good little detail. It draws attention to the face, and you always want to look at the character's face, so I use red to just be like, hey, up here. The blue is a nice touch with the red. It's sort of a greenish blue, sort of a turquoise, and his skin color, of course, is of the Caucasian variety, but there's such a wide spectrum of people that have a lighter skin tone, and we don't really have clear delineations as far as I know. I haven't researched enough between, is he a Highlander? Is he, Irish? Is he Spanish? We try to draw these different ideas and separations between like different types of white or different types of black, and I think it's really important as artists to understand that skin has a lot of different tones, and people come from different regions, and their genetics give them different layers to their skin. Some skin has olivey tones, some skin has very dark Nubian tones, and it's just something that's amazing to study from an artistic perspective, from a genealogical perspective, from every perspective really. And to kind of understand how to build characters out better, not in any sense of racial superiority in any capacity, nothing weird, all the disclaimers in the world, whatever. You got to be so oddly careful in today's climate. But basically, Maxwell is white. He, in some of the backstory of Gildian, is actually part noble, but that's his father disowned him. He is of noble blood, but his mother was a commoner. She was the servant in the home, and basically, all the weird Game of Thrones rigmarole that happens. He was an illegitimate child. He has this big, broad, sort of ridiculous bone structure because his mom was also very strong in her bone structure. So the father basically just kind of cast them away and had nothing to do with them, and they lived in poverty for a long time, and Maxwell worked very hard to get to a point wherein he is a pretty up-and-coming blacksmith. He apprenticed under one of the greats, and he lives in a more moderate part of the Gildian setting now. But yeah, even no matter what your skin tone, I always want to come across in any story that I write that everybody suffers in different capacities. It's really, a case by case basis kind of thing. It all depends on your circumstances. There's people want to isolate this one element and turn it into the everything, and it's just such a myopic view. You have to consider things comprehensively, but just take into account your character, take into account their background, their setting. Like the character Gemina, I based her very much on the Irish sort of skin tone, which is incredibly fair. There's a lot of clouds in that region, so they don't get a ton of sunlight, meaning they, over generations, haven't tanned very much, and they haven't had to develop much melanin. So yeah, it's just fun to consider skin tones in a lot of different ways. But then you also have things like juxtaposing different colors together. Like his color is fairly primary. You see that there's some red. There's a little touch of red on one of his armor belts. There's a slight touch of sort of a desaturated red in his kind of cloth hanging off of his pants there. And that's like a pop of red moving upward. Then you have sort of the more yellowy gold colors in the axe, in the shirt, in the hair, on the eyebrows. And then finally you have the blues, which kind of work well with the browns and the grays. So everything comes together really cohesively with Maxwell. He's not the brightest character. It's not like he's dumb, but he's very down to earth. He's very primary, as far as his ideas are concerned. He's not very spiritual or anything. He's not very heady. So I wanted to convey that in the color palette. He's more of a materialist. And of course you would be if you're working as a blacksmith. But anyway, I hope this was helpful for defining colors. I also gave him some super blue eyes because it helps to contrast with the red, again, create more pop near the face. But this is just a way of coloring once you have grayscale, and you see that I left some of the grayscale in there simply because the work was already done. But yeah, get your tonal separations first, then go in with your colors. If you can, use the paint bucket. Works better in Clip Studio and Photoshop. But yeah, this has been the Maxwell demo of going from grayscale to color for your characters. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Take care and happy creating.